Welcome to this IUN Community Garden session, Hummingbirds. The presenter for today's session is Susan Radovich. Susan, a semi-retired dental hygienist, has been a master gardener volunteer since 2005. In this volunteer role, she has engaged as a public speaker through the Lake County Purdue Extension Speakers Bureau, acted as a landscaping mentor to first-time homeowners through the Lake County Master Gardeners Association, Habitat for Humanity Partnership, and has served on numerous committees. In addition to gardening, Susan enjoys outdoor activities, including long bike rides, walking her dog, and playing outside with her 5-year-old granddaughter. She feels fortunate to have wonderful lakeshore so close to home. Welcome, Susan. We're glad to have you with us today.
Thank you, Amanda. Okay, today we're talking about attracting hummingbirds. These are the photo credits. My friend, Diane Fruth, who used to be in our Lake County Master Gardeners and has since relocated to Florida, did a lot of the programs, did this program, and she also did a lot of the photos with her husband, John Fruth. And he is a wonderful photographer, so I think you'll enjoy seeing a lot of the pictures. Next. Amazing hummingbird facts. General hummingbird facts. They are found only in the Americas. There are approximately 340 species that have been identified, and at least 6 new species have been identified since 1970. They can be found as far north as Alaska. Ecuador has 163 species. This is a calliope hummingbird. Next. 21 species can be found in the United States. Most are in Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. 16 species breed in the United States, and 4 species reach Canada. This is a rufous hummingbird. Next. Rufous, black-chinned, calliope, and ruby-throated hummingbirds migrate thousands of miles to Mexico and south. The rufous hummingbird migrates north to Alaska, and this is your rufous hummingbird. Next. Hummingbirds have the largest flight muscles relative to body size of any other vertebrate. Their wing muscles make up 25 to 30% of their body weight. This one featured is a broadbill hummingbird. Next. Normal flight speed is between 25 and 30 miles an hour. However, with a tailwind, speeds of 50 miles per hour are possible. The wings beat 80 times per second in forward flight. Wings may beat 200 times per second in display dives when speeds of 65 miles per hour can be reached. And again, this is your ruby-throated hummingbird. Next. Wings can move freely in any direction. The wings can move in a figure 8 because of a design in their shoulder joint. Hummingbirds are the only birds that can fly upside down, backwards, and sideways. And this is a picture of your broadbill hummingbird. Next. Hummingbirds have amazing memories. During migration, they often visit the same gardens and feeders they visited in prior years. They seem to have a genetic map. So if you can get them to your yard one time and you continue to feed them, you can count on seeing a lot of them again. Ruby-throated hummingbird is pictured here. Next. Relative to body size, hummingbirds have the largest heart of all warm-blooded animals, with the fastest heart rate, up to 1,200 beats per minute. And this is a calliope hummingbird. Next. Hummingbirds have very short legs, so they don't walk. This is a hummingbird, a ruby-throated hummingbird. Next. Iridescence is the result of the feather structure rather than the pigment. The iridescence is caused by the reflection of light. The feathered area on the throat in the males is called a gorget. On cloudy days, the gorget appears dark and without color. So what we're saying is the more sunlight you have reflecting off of these, the more color you're going to notice in them. The top one is a Costus hummingbird, and the bottom one is Anna's hummingbird. Next. Long tubular bill protects the tongue, and it can be used to probe flowers. It can catch insects, and it can also act as a weapon. The bone only goes partway down the bill, And the tip of the bill is actually rather soft, kind of like if you would press on the edge of your fingernail. And this is a female ruby-throated hummingbird. Next, hummingbird tongues can be twice as long as their bill. I don't know if you can see in this picture, but that little thin white line that you see going down into the feeder, that's the actual tongue of the hummingbird. The tongue is deeply split at the end, and it has tiny hair-like fibers that help it lap up nectar, and insects. Next, the tongue can lap nectar at 13 times per second. Next, hummingbirds prefer clearings in the forest and the forest edge. This is a female ruby-throated hummingbird. Next, diet may be 50 to 80% nectar, but insects are an important protein source. They feed on tree sap on holes made by sapsuckers. Notice how his head gets very, very deep into the flower. They do love tubular-shaped flowers. Next, they may feed as often as every 10 minutes, and they may drink twice their weight in nectar each day. They may visit 1,500 flowers per day. This is a black-chinned hummingbird. Hummingbirds may be more efficient pollinators than bees because they are warm-blooded and they feed from about half an hour before sunrise to half an hour after sunset. Bees are inactive in the cool, wet weather. One of the things that I have found, we love to sit outside on our patio during the summer and eat dinner there, and it's right around sunset. And I find that my hummingbirds are most active during that time. That's the time when we get to see them often. One of the things that I plant on our patio is I plant black and bloom salvia, which is a long tubular shaped flower, and lantana. They seem to love both of those, as well as the nectar feeder that we put out. And they will flit around and you can hear them coming. They make kind of as they fly through, and you will hear them coming before you actually see them. And they will hover there. I also have those same plants in a planter up above our chairs, and I will hear them up above there. And if I'm wearing a very colorful shirt, sometimes they'll come down and buzz past my shirt as well, thinking that's part of their feeding. Next. Over 8,000 plants in the Americas have developed which are pollinated by hummingbirds. One study found that hummingbirds deposited 10 times as much pollen as bees. And this is a ruby-throated hummingbird, and it is on a cardinal vine. Next, let's talk about the ruby-throated hummingbird. Next. Ruby-throated hummingbird is the only hummingbird to breed east of the Mississippi. The plant that I was telling you about, the black and bloom salvia, which is one of the types of salvia, there are several out there. This is what you're looking at. They love the bright, vivacious color. They also like that it's a very tubular shaped flower, and they can poke their beak way down into there. Next. The length is only 3.5 inches. Males have a ruby throat and are 10% smaller than the females. Next. Their weight, they're 1/8 of an ounce, about 3.1 grams. They're about the same weight as a penny, just teeny, teeny, tiny little birds. The weight can double in a week before migrations. Next. First-year males and females look the same. They look like adult females. The adult female has a more slender head than the male. Next. Ruby-throated hummingbirds have an explosive temperament and will defend their territory, and they will drive off the rivals, the bees, and even hawks. Next. Ruby-throated hummingbirds' range is as far north as Canada in the summer to the Central Americas in the winter. Next. Ruby-throated hummingbirds may migrate as many as 2,500 miles, flying over the Gulf of Mexico over 500 miles nonstop. Now, this is what I really find amazing. They migrate individually, not in a flock. How's that for a GPS system? They can find their way all the way from Mexico, all the way north to Michigan and Canada by themselves. The excess weight acquired before migration is used for fuel. Migration flying speeds are about 16 miles per hour, much slower than their feeding speed. A fat, in quotation marks, ruby-throated hummingbird should have plenty of excess fuel if the winds are cooperative. Next. Ruby-throated hummingbirds start north in February or early March, timing their flight to correspond with the native flowers. And they supplement their diet with insects and sap from the sapsucker holes. Next. These are some, I'm going to show you a series of progressive maps, and these were done in March 15th of 2011. This was the spring migration then. Next slide. March 24th, you can see they're moving north. Next slide. April 6th, some of them are starting to reach up in our area. Next. Now you can see they're almost up into Canada, the spring migration as of May 9th. So if you haven't started putting out your hummingbird feeders, now is the time for you to start getting them out there. Next. And this goes on into June. Now, June, they're all the way, a bunch of them have gone on all the way up into Canada. That doesn't mean they all migrate there. We have a number of hummingbirds that will stay in our area in Northwest Indiana. Unlike the Baltimore Orioles, and I will talk about those a little bit later, the Baltimore Orioles do not stay in our area. They will start migrating up here about the end of April, early May, and by the middle of May, they will be up in Michigan, and we really won't see the Baltimore Orioles other than when they're passing through. We only get them for 2 or 3, maybe 4 weeks at the most out of the whole year. Next. Okay, the ruby-throated hummingbird. The males arrive first, followed by females about 10 days later. Banded males, ones that tagged with a band, are known to return to their same breeding territory, and the females may return to the same nest and they'll just refurbish it. Next. Males select and defend a territory. They look for nectar sources and insects. The size of the territory depends on the nectar sources, as small as 20 square yards to an area as big as an acre. The females need insects for egg production. The females choose the most aggressive males. Next. Males perform a U-shaped dive up to 45 feet above the female in courtship ritual. Next. Nesting season is from late April and all of May and June. I don't know if you can tell or not. She's actually sitting on a nest in the branch. Later on, I'll show you how tiny this little nest is. Next. Females use spider webs to anchor the nest to the branch and line the nest with thistle, dandelion down, and spider webs. This is an Anna's hummingbird. The ruby-throated ones use spider webs the same way in nest building. Next. Females may camouflage the nest with lichen. One researcher counted 200 pieces of lichen on a single nest. Next. Females build their nest over 6 to 10 days. Males do not participate in nest building or feeding the young. Next. Females may return to the same nest following year, making repairs and building up side of the nest. The rim expands as the young get bigger. Next. The nest is only 1.5 or 1.5 to 2 inches in diameter outside, and the inside is only 1 to 1.5 inches, and it's only about 1.5 inches tall. Now, as diminutive as these are, it is possible to see them. My sister lives out in the suburbs of Los Angeles, and she called me very excited last year. They had a hummingbird nest in the tree outside their home, and they were able to get the binoculars and be able to watch as the hummingbirds were laying their eggs and hatching them and taking care of them. It was very exciting for them. So it is possible to see them, although they are very diminutive. Next. Females lay 2 white, pea-sized eggs. The incubation time is 12 to 15 days. Newly hatched chicks are about the same size as honeybees, And if you look at that bottom picture, they've put a penny inside, not my sister, but whoever did these photos, put a penny inside the nest so that you could see how the size of it is relative to the penny. Next. Females feed young with nectar, spiders, and small insects. The female leaves the nest for only very brief periods, perhaps as little as 15 seconds to feed. Female broods the nest almost constantly until the chicks are about 9 days old. Next. After hatching, the young leave the nest in 18 to 23 days. The female continues to watch them for 1 to 2 weeks. When the hatchlings leave the nest, they may weigh 4.5 grams, while their mother is down to 2.5 grams. Females raise 1 or 2 broods per year. The female will sometimes build a second nest while feeding first hatchlings. And we thought we were busy moms. Next, fall migration. The males start south first, just as you remember, they came up north first, they also head south first. And then the females go, and then the young go after them. Fall migration in Northwest Indiana peaks in late August to early September. Next. The first ruby-throated hummingbird start over the Gulf in July, peaking in early to mid-September. The last stragglers leave the U.S. by November 15th. Flying over the Gulf can take 18 to 22 hours nonstop. Some researchers think most fall migration takes place through Mexico, not over the Gulf. Next. They measure bill length and wing length. Females are larger and have longer bills. The sixth primary wing, which is what that little line down there is pointing to, the sixth primary wing feather on males is shortened and pointed. And that's one of the ways they're able to see the distinction between the males and the females. Next. Special tools are used to attach a tiny band to the hummingbird's leg. Not an easy job since hummers' legs are about the diameter of a toothpick. Next. Attracting hummingbirds. Next. One of the best ways is open lawn space and trees and shrubs for cover, and that's how you help attract them so that they feel safe from the predators. Next. Provide nectar plants. Use natives whenever possible. Include plants for summer, spring, and early fall. Next. Ornithophilus blooms, that is, flowers pollinated by birds, are often red and unscented. Hummingbirds prefer flowers with long tubular blossoms. Their first color choice is red, then orange, pink, and blue. Why red? Hummingbirds are curious. Maybe red stands out. Red absorbs more heat from the sun, and red is not attractive to bees. Next. Plant patches of the same species to provide larger quantities of nectar. Next. Hanging baskets can be attractive to hummingbirds as well if you have limited gardening space. Or you can use your window boxes, your trellises. You can use baskets that are mounted onto your walls. They even have some that you can attach to your windows themselves if they're lightweight enough. Next. Be creative. Add vines to mailboxes, utility poles, any type of containers. Use your imagination. Next. They like a water source. Traditional bird baths are too deep. The ruby-throated hummingbird will drink dew from plant leaves or water from sprinklers while in flight. Next. Hummingbird feeders really do work. You have to be patient, and the yellow on feeders may attract bees, so they do not suggest you do that. Next. Here's how you make it. 1 part sugar to 4 parts water. Boil for 2 minutes to discourage your mold growth. Clean every 3 to 4 days. If it's hot, you may have to clean it more often than that because we do not want to grow any mold. On your colder nights, take the feeder in and rehang outside first thing in the morning. They do not like cold nectar, so you want it to be room temperature or warmer. Next. Any type of feeder will work. Look for one that's easy to clean and easy to take down and put up because you're going to be taking it down and filling it a lot. You can make your own. You could use an empty bottle and turn it upside down, like you can see on the right-hand corner. They turned it upside down and put it into a plastic tub and did it that way. Red food coloring is not needed. Matter of fact, they really recommend you don't do it, but there's no evidence that it is truly harmful. But you really don't need it. You just need some type of red color or some type of a bright color that attracts them. You could even just tie a ribbon onto it, something that gets their attention to come over to it. Next, put your feeder up a week before the first ruby-throated hummingbirds are expected. Leave it up for 1 week after. Keeping the feeder up in the fall will not prevent the migration. You're not going to be able to keep them here just because you feed them all year long. But remember, they are coming up from the south, from either Florida or Central America or South America or something. They've been flying a long distance. They are hungry. They are going to be looking for a source of food. So if you provide them with that food, you're going to be more likely to attract them into your yard. Next. Favorite hummingbird plants that you can put in your yard. Next. Trees and shrubs, the eastern redbuds. They're all blooming right now. They're beautiful. They're a great way to get the color out here. They also are kind of considered understory trees for the most part, so these blooms will be fading soon, but right now they're absolutely gorgeous. Next, the butterfly bush. That's another way. As you can see, they hover up with their very quick wingspan, and they can stick their tongue right down into all those many flowers that are on there. Next, evergreens. There is no nectar, but there are lots of spiders, and as we said, that's part of their diet. Next, the trumpet vines. Again, you have the bright color, you have a tubular shaped flower. They're very happy visiting these. Next, coral honeysuckle is another one, and you can intermix several of these. If you look at this mailbox, this was taken over in the Munster neighborhood, and there are several different types of vines going on there. There's some clematis, there's the trumpet vine, they're intermixed. This is obviously later in the season by how prolific it is. They will die back over the winter, but they can come back and you can have some more of it again each year. Next. Native perennials for shade. This is a wild geranium. It will bloom early in the spring. The one at my house generally flowers out end of May, early into June, and the blossoms last on there for probably about a month. But the green foliage stays through the course of the summer. Next. Native perennials for shade include fire pinks. As we said, they do love this color. Next. Virginia bluebells. Those are blooming right now. My yard looks very similar to this, obviously not quite as profuse because it's not totally wooded as this area is. But if you have sandy soil, and I hear they do not like to grow well in clay, but if you have sandy soil and you plant a few of these, they can go prolifically. I have very sandy soil. I started with a flat of Virginia bluebells, maybe a dozen years ago, and I have since been picking them up and moving them around. I do have a very shaded yard with lots of trees. They have gotten to be rather big colonies of them, and yes, they do like that. Next, columbine. That's another one that works very well, and it is very viney looking, but it has some beautiful blossoms to it. Next, cardinal flower. Again, you can see the long tubular shape and the bright red color, which attracts them. Next, penstemon. This is something that will bloom more in the summer. It's also called beard tongue. And again, it does not necessarily have to be red. Penstemon comes in a number of colors, and they do like that again. Tubular flower. Next. Wild blue lupine. These are another one, not only good for that, but they're also very good with certain butterflies. A lot of these plants that I am telling you about will help attract butterflies to your yard as well, which is another thing that we're always trying to get in. So you're not necessarily planting just for the hummingbirds or for your own beauty. Next. Butterfly weed. Butterfly weed is an orangish type of color. There are some other ones that are similar that are in other shades. Next. Perennials for sun. We've already talked about the ones for shade. For those of us who have lots of trees, we don't have the opportunity to grow all these plants that grow in the sun. But these are ones that will bloom. These are perennials. Perennial, if you're not familiar with it, means it'll come up each year as opposed to an annual. If you had an annual, say like in our area, geraniums are annuals, and you would buy those and you put them out and they only bloom, and you would either have to dig them up and take them in and winter them over and put them back out, or replant the following year. Perennials are ones that you can leave in your yard. They will come up each year afterwards. Perennials do not usually bloom the entire season. Usually they have a shorter time frame, like the wild geraniums that we were talking about earlier. They will bloom for like a month. The foliage will be there, but the blossoms will not necessarily be there. So these are some of those that will come up each year as a perennial for sun. Verana spicata, it's red fox, and then they have royal blue. As I said, it comes in some different colors. You can find them different varieties. Whenever you are planting, don't just plant one of these and one of those. Try to plant them in colonies where you see a bigger grouping. Keep in mind, it's easier for the birds, the bees, the butterflies, the hummingbirds, anything that you're trying to get it. It's easier for them to locate it if it's a bigger clump of color than if it's one or two little species here and there. So you would be better having less variety and a larger quantity if you're trying to attract them. Next. Annuals for the sun. Again, these are the ones I told you, if you buy them and you plant them, they will bloom all season long, but then you will have to replant them again the following year. Salvia is a good one. I told you I particularly liked putting in black and bloom salvia. I've had very good luck with that, attracting them. Next. Larkspur. Next. Goldenrod. There are various species of it. It's called solidago. A lot of people tend to think that this is something that causes hay fever, and that is not the case. You do not have a problem with that. Next. Your zinnias. A lot of people plant zinnias. These come in many different colors. Throw a packet of seeds down. You can buy them for very inexpensively. Sow them into the ground. They will come up, and you can get them in a multiple of colors. And I have seen them land on this a lot. They really do like the zinnias. Next. Annuals for your shade. Spotted jewelweed. This is a type of an impatient. It's native that blooms in late summer to fall, which is essential for their fall migration. Researchers have shown that one hummingbird can visit up to 200 jewelweed flowers in a matter of 15 minutes. Next. So enjoy your hummingbirds. I think you'll very much enjoy that. Next. Here's the information about it if you want to do it. I'd also like to talk about orioles a little bit. The Baltimore orioles are something that come through, and we often enjoy having them visit our yards as well. I talked about it briefly. They are not here the whole season. They will come through pretty much towards the end of April, and they will be here up through the middle of May. They do go up north. My friend who has a place up at Stony Lake, Michigan, which is on the west coast of Michigan, about halfway up the state, she has hummingbirds and Baltimore orioles at her feeders every evening, well, all day, but especially during the evenings, all summer long. We do not get the Baltimore orioles other than that very brief time. The Baltimore orioles will be just as happy eating the same nectar that you put out for your hummingbirds. In addition to that, they really, really like orange color. So if you will cut slices of orange or a half of an orange and put them out there, they will gladly eat your oranges. And they are also very particular, are very attracted to grape jelly. If you find that your grape jelly is going too quickly, you can mix 1 part of grape jelly with 1 part of water, run it through your blender so it's kind of like a thick syrupy type of thing, and then put it in your feeder that way, and they'll work it. You do not necessarily have to buy an Oriole feeder. You can. There are some really interesting ones looking out there, but you can make your own even. Any way you want to do that. The main thing that you need to know is you need to poke it onto something where it's pretty secure, because they will knock it to the ground if you're not careful, because they are a bigger bird than the hummingbirds. I also find that I have to put a squirrel baffle out around my post that I keep it on, because the squirrels and everything, like, and the raccoons and everybody else likes to get up and get into the oranges and the grape jelly and things like that. but it is quite a joy to have the orioles come through if you can get them. But they are here for a very short time. But again, they come up from Central America, South America. Some of them are coming up from Florida. It's a long flight. They're hungry. They are looking for that particular food source if they can get it. Unlike the hummingbirds, they do not eat insects. So they are looking for more things that are in the other area. Do we have any questions?
I have a question, Susan. So what kinds of hummingbirds are you getting in your yard?
I get a lot of the ruby-throated hummingbirds. And what's really interesting, I always thought they went brr, 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 just buzz back and forth. 2 years ago, we strung three lines of the Edison lights across our patio. So they had that big, thick, black wire, the wire that's coated with the vinyl, and the Edison lights hanging down it so we could turn it on in the evening. And I found they actually like to go up and sit on those wires. And I did not know that they would do that. But they will kind of rest up there and then they zoom down. I have on my patio, I have 2 different large pots that are filled on each side of the patio with the black and bloom salvia and the lantana, as well as a bunch of herbs. I have a lot of shade at my house and I don't have a lot of sun. On my patio is one of the few places that I do have sun. Also hanging on one of the brick walls, I have 2, excuse me, 2 half round planters. And again, in those, I put lantana, black and bloom salvia, and a few other things. And so they tend to flit from one to the other back and forth, and they don't rest a lot in between there. And then probably a short distance from there, I have my hummingbird feeders. But we really enjoy watching them, and they are close enough that we've been able to take a number of pictures of them while they're in feeding. It's really enjoyable. It's fun.
Wonderful. Susan, one of our participants has a question. How can we prevent bees coming to the hummingbird feeders and chasing off the hummingbirds? She's noticed a lot of competition among the bees and the hummingbirds. What suggestions do you have or any recommendations on specific types of feeders to help with this?
Right. Part of the problem that you're running into is when we feed our hummingbirds, we're using sugar, sugar water. So the bees are attracted to that. One of the most important things is keep your bird feeders cleaned out regularly. The one that I like to use the most, and I've tried several different ones, it's more of a tall cylindrical thing that holds the water in it, the nectar, I should say, not the water, but the nectar. And it screws into a platform type thing. And it has 4 different ports that you can get into and the little thing. And I have to use a very tiny little brush to get down in and clean inside of those. But I find that I don't get as many bees doing it that way. Or the bigger problem that I have is when I'm trying to do it, sometimes I get more of a problem with ants. And the way you prevent getting the ants in there is they have a little device that you can buy. It looks like a half round cup with a hook at the top and a hook at the bottom. And you hook your hummingbird feeder onto the bottom of this half round cup. Then you hook the cup itself up to the hook that you're putting it from, or your chain or whatever you're attaching it to, and put water in that so that as the ants try to come down, they will drown in the water. That doesn't help a lot with the bees because a lot of the bees will just fly up themselves. I don't have that much trouble with bees though.
We have a question in chat that says, do you put a shallow source of water out for the hummingbirds?
I do. I tend to have a shallow source out, but more likely that they tend to like my sprinklers. When my sprinklers are going, I find them flying through the sprinklers a lot more than I do actually visiting the shallow source.
Thank you, Susan. We have another question in chat about the hummingbird feeders. How far apart do you recommend that they are placed?
Let me think. My friends Sally and Joe, theirs are probably no more than 3 feet apart. They're pretty close. So there's not a problem. They seem to get in there. It's not like you have to spread them all over the yard.
Do you think a cluster is more effective?
Well, one of the reasons they do it, and I would recommend this, is what I tend to do too. I put my feeder near my plants, put them where you're going to see them, because half the fun of having them is being able to see them. So if you can get them up close to you, you will enjoy them a lot more. You also want to make sure you put it at a place where you can easily reach it to take it down to clean it, because you're going to have to clean it often. When I make my nectar, I generally make a big batch, not a big batch, but a regular batch size, which is like 4 cups of water. And I put half of it in the refrigerator and I put the other half in my feeder. And about 2 days later, I pull it out of the refrigerator, let it come to room temperature, wash out my bird feeder, put it in, and then I'd start over again. Because you do have to make sure it doesn't grow mold and mildew. In the hot summer weather, it will get moldy a lot faster. You want to make sure you keep that bird feeder really clean. That's the most important thing. So you have to have easy access to it. But get these up close where you can enjoy them. They're not that scared of you. Like I said, I can be sitting on the chair and they're feeding above on the wall planter above my head. I bet they're no more than 2.5 feet above my head. They are not afraid of you. They can move fast enough. They know you're not going to catch them.
Thank you so much, Susan, for this very educational, informative, and fun presentation on hummingbirds. We appreciate your time.
Good.
And thank you everyone for joining us today. And for those who are going to be joining us on Zoom, thank you for watching.
Great. Thank you, Amanda.